Benefits Advisory Group meeting. We appreciate all of your participation. Let's say, good morning. Can we go to the next slide, please? Just a reminder, we do have closed captions in English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. Reminder of how you may access the closed captions. At the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a menu of options. If you press, you hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen. Click the square CC icon towards the right side of the menu to toggle captions on. Click the sub-menu arrow to access more settings, including language, font color, and font size. Next slide. In the effort to continue this interaction, there is an ASL interpreter in addition to closed captioning. To make sure the interpreter is always visible, please right-click your video and select Spotlight Video. For those watching on YouTube, when we screen share, you will be able to see the slideshow, closed captioning, and the ASL interpreter. You will still be able to hear different people speaking, but may not see. There will be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today, roughly around 9:50 a.m. Verbal public comment will be welcome in the Zoom webinar during the designated time with the option to turn on your camera. Please use the link located in the meeting description on the YouTube meeting page or on the IBR CBAG meeting webpage. Commenters will not be allowed to share their screens and will be removed from the room once the public comment period concludes. Comment by phone, please dial 646-931-3860 or 408-638-0968. You want to remember to enter meeting ID number 823-5803-3783, as well as passcode 385815. Please also remember to dial *9 to raise your hand. After you are invited to speak, please dial *6 to unmute yourself. Next slide there. We also have a safety protocol here, which I have. There is a map in front of you. This, so you can follow that as I'll read these instructions here. Our office is located on the second floor of the building, and we are currently in conference room 25B at 500 Broadway Street, Suite 200, Vancouver, Washington. In the event of an emergency, please immediately call 911 to ensure that help is on the way. If you are trained and it's necessary, provide CPR and or AED assistance for first aid equipment. First aid kits and AEDs is available in the kitchen. Right over there. There are 5 fire extinguishers located throughout the office, in the kitchens, at the coffee room, near the lockers, in conference room 4, and close to restroom 5, West Stairs A. For evacuation, please use the primary routes through West Stairs A and B or East Stairs. Stay calm and wait for emergency responders in a designated safe location. Familiarize yourself with these procedures and equipment locations to ensure safety for all. In the event of an evacuation, after exiting the building through West Stairs A and B or East Stairs, please proceed to the designated gathering location. This is situated at the corner of E 5th Street and E. Okay. And then if we can go back, next slide, please. Reminder of our group meeting agenda agreements. Remember, for us to put relationships first, keep focused on our common goal, for us to notice the power dynamics in the room, creating a space for multiple truths and norms, for us to be kind and brave. And I just want to commend this group for doing both. Leading this type of work is new for mega projects, so we have really exhibited that. For us, practicing examining racially biased systems and processes, that this is a learning space for everyone, that we continue to look for learning Advisory group members will turn cameras on as you share this space together. Take care of your personal needs as they come up. Please let the facilitator know if you need to step away. Virtual participants can participate by taking written notes and using the raise hand and speak feature for active engagement. That we continue to welcome diverse perspectives. It's okay to disagree. For us to move up, and for us to assume and have good intentions. With that, I would like to invite our program administrator, Greg Johnson, for opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Community Benefits Advisory Group meeting. And once again, we thank you for your participation. We have some important news that I will deliver during the update, but needless to say, the program is in good shape, and this group is going to be key to our program, making this a project that is not just concrete and steel. So welcome, everyone.
Great, thank you, Greg. And I also would like to invite Marianne, City Manager.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to keep this project moving forward. I'm sure you heard that the City of Vancouver received a $30 million grant from the federal government to work on a lid over the I-5, the new I-5 area. So these are exciting times. So let's keep going.
Great, thank you, Mayor. The City of Portland regrets not being able to attend this morning. So next we'll have introductions here in the room. If you can please share your name, organizational affiliation, or at-large status and pronouns. And our check-in question for the day is, what's something that suddenly reminds you of your hometown? Start with Brian.
I am Brian Winsheimer. I'm the ODOT Region 1 manager. It's something that reminds me of my hometown. That's hit me cold on that one. It's a little tough. I would, I guess the thing that strikes it for me is when I start thinking about my high school mascot, which was Sunset High School, the Apollos down there in Beaverton, Oregon.
Courtney Carter with Columbia Corridor Association. That is a tough one.
It really is, actually.
Yeah, but I guess when I think about it, the big trees look on the street, these massive trees on each side that reach almost all the way over the street, so it's all shaded.
Everybody, Marion Holiday. I'm serving as Darcy's proxy today for Workforce Southwest Washington. I didn't want to ruin the name tag, so just as is. For my hometown, I'd say Waffle House. We went to Waffle House a lot, Augusta, Georgia. So
I wish we had one here.
Holly Williams, Vancouver community member. Her was born in Charlottesville, Virginia. I guess you call that the hometown. Probably the rotunda at the University of Virginia.
I'm Vicki Nakashima, and I use her pronouns. I represent the Equity Advisory Group, and I've lived in East Vancouver. I'm from Spokane, Washington. So it reminds me of cold. All winter.
My name is Tom Hickey, Portland resident. I am also liaison with the Citizens Advisory Group. I was born in Oregon and lived in Portland in the early 60s when I was a small child, and then moved away to the East Coast for 45, 50 years. And so when I came back to Oregon, and the first time I went to the Overlook at Vista Point, I had such a visceral, deep sense of, oh my God, this is real. This is, because I had this memory of Vista Point as like something I must have made up in my head as a small child. But to see that overlook over the gorge in reality and realize that, no, this is the real thing. This Columbia Gorge is real and amazing. And that was, to me, the biggest reminder of my hometown.
Well, good morning, everyone. John L. Bell, one of your co-facilitators. I grew up in Portland, and I think what reminds me of Portland in spring, the beautiful just cherry blossoms that we have here. So that's always just one of those moments. It's killing my allergies, but.
Morning, Ann McInerney, Ogle Mayor for the City of Vancouver, she, her pronouns. For me, it's all of the seed catalogs that are popping up on social media right now. Eugene, Oregon is my hometown. And this is the time of year when we would start all of the garden plants, all the tomatoes and the peppers and everything else. So when I see all of the seed and rose garden nursery advertisements on social media, and on TV and everything else, that's home.
Lon Pluckman, City Manager for the City of Vancouver, use he, him pronouns. I am from the Midwest originally, specifically Iowa, and I will spare you being from hog country from what that smell is like. I'll just tell you that the thing that reminds me the most of there is the smell of sweet.
Hi, Walter Valenta. My dad was in the Air Force, so I have about 10 hometowns. And then, so in a way, though, I think of Portland as my hometown. And I think the thing that reminds me the most is when you live on the water here, how the surface of the water changes through the years, through the tides and all that. So the most relaxing thing is sitting out and looking at the water. It's the top of the water surface, and it's sort of a private experience that I have. It's really unique here. And, the river really does change all through the year.
Good morning, everyone. Aiden Gronauer, Assistant Director of Civil Rights and Equity for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. My hometown is Memphis, Tennessee. So these two go together, so we got to name two, John L. Anytime I'm having good barbecue or listening to blues music, the two together, that reminds me of home.
Janie Haygood, Chair of the Vancouver Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission. As the daughter of a lawyer and also a potato farmer growing up in rural Idaho, I have to say the potato. I can tell an Idaho potato by the smell. And my father is so proud of his potatoes that whenever we go on trips, he would load up our motorhome's bathroom with boxes of potatoes that he could hand out to people wherever we went. We often got confused with Iowa, but his potatoes he was very, very proud of.
Was it Jamie, was it a russet or a golden?
Russets, yeah, and the smell of French fries, because we had Lamb Weston in our town, and so that smell also brings me back home.
You guys are making me hungry this morning.
Right?
Emily, why don't we
Exactly.
pass it over to you to introduce our members online.
All right, well, thank you. If I could please invite my CBAG members online to please raise your hand so that we can call on you, and then I'll get us started. So my hometown is in Northern California, Redding. And so what reminds me of Redding is lots of nature. There's beautiful Mount Shasta nearby, Shasta Lake, Whiskeytown Lake, Mount Lassen. And I didn't fully appreciate it until I moved somewhere like Houston, where there's not a lot of that. So it makes me think of my hometown and nostalgia for that. So now I will turn it over to Michael and then Farley.
Hello, everyone. Michael Strauss, he, him pronouns, with Kimco Realty, owner of the Jansen Beach Center, representing our tenants, small and large businesses, as well as retail businesses in particular across Hayden Island. I am from Irvine, California, and the smell of orange blossoms still trigger me and remind me of beautiful Orange County, Southern California. The irony, of course, is that all of the orange groves have long since been developed and there's nothing like that left. But when I smell it, I still think of it. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Michael. Let's go to Farley and then Greg.
Morning, everybody. Farley Winters, pronouns are she, her, and I'm with LSW Architects and also a downtown Vancouver resident, Arnita, I should say. What reminds me of home? So I recently discovered the sound of seagulls. So I hadn't really noticed their absence, and then I heard one recently and I was like, oh, it's like home. And I grew up in West Seattle, which is a bedroom community of Seattle, kind of similar to the Vancouver-Portland relationship, although not such a bedroom community anymore up here in Vancouver. But yeah, sound of seagulls.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go to Greg and then Peter.
So Greg Johnson, IBR Program Administrator, and a thing that instantly reminds me of my childhood and home. I grew up just north of Detroit in a rural area, and the smell of burning leaves, because it was always raking leaves and burning leaves in the fall, and that instantly takes me back to my childhood in rural northern Macomb County.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Peter and then Steve.
Good morning, Peter Fells. I represent ACE, Alliance for Community Engagement, which is a group of environmental organizations. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I'm sorry to say what triggers me is bad air.
Thank you, Peter. Let's go to Steve and then Serena, if you'd like to.
So Steve Barnett, I'm representing the Cowlitz Indian tribe. I grew up in Brush Prairie before 2000. So what reminds me of home is smells. We were halfway between the Camas Mill and the Vancouver Boise Cascade Mill and the dairy farms. So it had a unique smell to it that means home to me, but most people didn't like.
Thank you, Steve. Serena, go ahead.
I'm Serena Stoudemire Wesley, Assistant Director here at ODOT for Equity and Civil Rights. And I was born, raised, and rooted right here in Portland, Oregon, but I am now a current resident of Vancouver, Washington, living right through the fort, on the other side of the fort. And so reminds me, I love the fresh air of Oregon. I've lived in Texas, Illinois, it doesn't matter where you go, there's nothing like Oregon and Washington. Oh, and now my state of Washington, so yes.
Thank you so much. With that, Jonah, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. If we could get the slides back up, please. We'll go through the agenda and then we'll have a program update. We're on public comment. Okay, here in just a moment, we'll receive the CBAG public comment. We'll then have an opportunity of receiving a program update. And then we're going to roll up our sleeves and do a review and refine of potential benefits in the mobility and accessibility, physical design, and community benefits category, what we're referring to, you'll recall, as tranche 4. And these are recommendations that this body has already made. So this is an opportunity for us to synthesize, combine some, where we might have repetition, as well as refine. Then we'll have close and next steps. So if we can go to the next slide, public comment slide. Just a reminder, if you'd like to make a verbal comment, please dial 646-931-3860 or 408-638-0968. The meeting ID number is 823-5803-3783. Passcode is 385815. Please remember to dial *9 to raise your hand. The facilitator will call on participants to provide comment. Please dial *6 to unmute yourself. Please provide your name and affiliation. We'll roughly have 10 minutes to be divided among the number of requested speakers. If we run out of time and you have not had a chance to speak, you can still provide comments after the meeting. Next slide, please. To submit advisory group comments after the meeting, please fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CBAG public comment in the subject line. You may also dial 360-859-0494 for our Washingtonians, or 503-897-9218 for our Oregonians. You may also dial our 800 number, 1-888-503-6735, and state CBAG public comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say CBAG public comment in the subject line or in the body of the message for them to be identified and distributed to CBAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance for their next meeting. Do we have anyone sign up for public comment?
No one here at this time.
Okay, please keep me posted if that changes. With that, we'll invite Program Administrator Greg Johnson for an update.
Once again, good morning, everyone, and let's go to the next slide. So the program has continued to be very busy, and so I have one slide, but there's a lot of good things that have happened in the last month. So the first bit of good news is that we signed the final agreements for $2.1 billion worth of federal grants. So those things are signed, and we are ready to move on, starting to implement and move those things into the procurement and construction phase. Mayor Ann mentioned the award to the City of Vancouver, and IBR was a partner in helping to submit the grant application for the community connector. We think that is a key important part of this program. Once again, it goes beyond just the purpose and need of the program. It goes beyond the concrete and steel to start creating some space and reconnect downtown Vancouver with Fort Vancouver. So we think that was an important signal of what a community benefit can look like. So we are continuing to do presentations. So you see that we talked to, I was up in Bremerton last month talking to the Design Build Forum. They had great questions about where the program is at and how we intend to deliver the program going forward. So great questions came out of that. We met with the TriMet Committee on Accessible Transportation, and we're having a great internal conversation about how we can jointly work with TriMet's committee on accessibility, on the state of Washington, the state of Oregon, organizations that focus on accessibility and accessibility rights. So these are issues that are important to the success of the program, and we're going to keep that at the forefront. We also had a presentation before the Professional Land Surveyors of Oregon at their 2025 conference. And we talked to the Clark County Regional Emergency Services Agency. So we're continuing to get the word out. We're going to continue to engage the community. Even though our public comment period is over, we still want people to make their opinions and voices heard in this program so we can make this the best program ever. So a couple of other things that folks have raised with me that has caused some consternation. We had some good news during the nominee for the USDOT Secretary, Sean Duffy, who was a former congressman from Wisconsin. During his hearing in front of the Senate, Senator Cantwell asked him explicitly about, will you continue to fund these programs, these key projects around the country that are key critical to the economy, and specifically citing IBR, and his commitment was that yes, they will continue to fund and look for ways to make these programs move forward in a more efficient and effective way. So that is good news for our program. Also, you may have heard about the executive order that is looking at DE&I initiatives and taking that personnel off payroll for federal agencies. This has, at this point, as our folks have read it, no impact on our program specifically, because we have both state and federal dollars as part of this. So we are continuing with our efforts and our commitment that we made to both sides of the river in regards to equity, fairness, and how we do outreach to communities of concern in this program. So this is going to be a interesting time to see how this plays out. But right now we have commitments from the leadership of both DOTs to say we're doing the right things, keep doing the right things. So with that, I will take any questions or concerns that anyone may have.
Questions for Greg? Slide down there. All right, seeing none. Thank you, Greg, for that update.
All right, thanks everyone.
Great. So next we'll get into our review and refine, and Emily, I'm going to pass it off to you to tell us what we're going.
Sounds great. If we could please get the slides up. All right. Well, before we dig in, I just wanted to take a second, now that we are in the new year and this is our first meeting of 2025, I wanted to take a pause to just express gratitude to this group for all of the amazing work that you all have been putting in. We made it through some decision making, and that is no small feat on a project like this and on such complex issues. So just really want to appreciate all of your contributions, leaning in with us, asking the tough questions, and working through things together. Just really proud of the work that this group has been doing, and thank you so much. And so, as you know, we moved through our tranches 2 and 3, and so now we are moving on to our last tranche 4. And we know that we had to kind of push a little aggressively to get through that decision making on the last 2 to hit some of these deadlines that we were needing to hit. Now we have a little bit of flexibility, and with tranche 4, we have a couple of months, or a few months actually, in our work plan where we can really take some time and refine this batch of recommendations. So with that, we will dig in, and I will ask Fabian if you could please screen share our chart. And so you all should have in the room a copy of the chart with you, both the chart with all of the recommendations and then those that we'll be going through today. Want to point out that on the focus chart for today, this does not reflect all of the tranche 4. It's just the ones that we will be hoping to talk through today. Thank you so much. All right, so with that, we will dig in here. Reminder, this is our review refine. So this is the time for us to ask clarifying questions, to, if we have language suggestions we want to edit, anything like that, this is the time for us to do that and to really dig in here. So we will kick it off with our first, which is in the mobility and accessibility category. And so this one reads, involve experts with lived experience and the broader community in transportation planning to ensure that designs effectively address the mobility and accessibility needs of various groups, especially individuals with disabilities. I have some notes here from our technical teams as well as from others within the program. And so there are currently discussions of including ADA requirements specifically into contracts. Also, I want to point out that Greg had mentioned during the program update that there are plans to see how the program can work with some of the existing advisory.
I don't want to interrupt. This is the other interpreter. We need to switch. I don't see myself, so there's no way to do this.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. So yes, as I mentioned, Greg had pointed out that the program is working with or is planning to see how we can collaborate with some of the existing advisory committees that do have representation for individuals with disabilities. TriMet has such group. I believe CTRN also has an advisory committee. ODOT also recently launched a new group. And so there are plans to see how the program can leverage these groups to really get this perspective. And so with that, I will open this up for discussion if folks have any thoughts or questions, want to do some refinement here.
Thoughts, questions on the first one? We'll start maybe here in the room. Yes,
Holly Williams. I don't know if we need to specifically spell this out, but not everything that is of concern is addressed by ADA. So, so I think the hope here was to kind of articulate that, yes, of course, we're going to design to ADA, but the reason that you bring these folks in is because there are many things that are not specifically in law, many design elements. Is that making sense?
Yeah. ADA being sort of before what you're saying, what else, right? What else kind of?
Yeah, yeah, and some ADA components are, you know, maybe not even really specific to a big infrastructure project like this, but maybe more related to a building. You know, the requirements are still there, of course, but it's a different kind of animal.
Hi, Tom Hickey. I'm just reading that first, well, it is only one sentence, but that first line just comes awkwardly and it's a little hard to interpret. Involve experts with lived experience and the broader community. I'm assuming when they say experts with lived experience, and then we mean representatives of the broader community, and those are two separate things? Or are we talking about experts on the broader community? I feel like there's a missing object there, and it would be, I'd like to insert the phrase representatives of the broader community rather than just leave that undefined.
Yeah, I had sort of similar thoughts. It seemed a little awkward. I think I know what they're trying to get at, but then that's where you get into trouble is making those kind of assumptions. So what about maybe involve various disability communities? Because I think when I read that, and what I hope is that it's just basically saying, in addition to ADA, we want to bring in people that are disabled with various disabilities to comment on some of our plans, to enhance some of those plans, you know, to say, yeah, that meets ADA, but it's not really very effective. How about this other choice? Things like that. And I think the real key to this one is the management of it, really. I mean, I think we've got the basic idea down there, but it's how much do you involve in, and when do you say, okay, enough, let's move on.
Walter?
Maybe to address Holly's point, you could add in a line that says that effectively address the mobility and accessibility needs beyond minimum ADA requirements. Because that's what you're sort of saying, rather than just meeting minimum, this is to go the, you know, maybe there's some other little subtle nuances that we're going to meet beyond the minimum. Do you think we should put something like that in?
That could be helpful.
Jenna, we've got a couple hands here online. We have Shabana and then Greg.
Yeah, 1 second. We're not done here yet, Emily.
Oh, okay, sorry.
What were you saying there, Holly?
I think that could be helpful.
Okay. Could you rephrase that again, Walter?
Effectively address the mobility and accessibility needs beyond minimal ADA.
Okay, Emily, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yes, if we could go to Shabana and then we have Greg and Karen.
Hi, good morning, folks. I am curious. I've got a question and then potentially a follow-up statement, depending on the answer. Sorry. Is there a space in the is there a space anywhere where the word accessibility is defined? I don't mean like in the dictionary. I mean in the IBR material. as we're looking at mobility and accessibility.
Is that something?
I think mobility is defined in that way either.
Yeah.
Something we could add.
Yeah, I think the answer, it's no, not technically, but Greg, maybe you want to correct us on that, or I don't think accessibility, typically we've been using federal definitions.
It's taken from the ADA.
Yeah.
Definition of accessibility.
It's taken from the ADA definition of accessibility.
Okay. And this probably will come as no surprise to anybody, but the reason I'm asking is because there are components of the IBR when we think about when I think about accessibility as a representative working with communities of color, I also think about who has access to a space. There are other components of the bridge replacement, such as the community connector, which is very exciting that the city just got a lot of money for, and all the bridges exciting. We want to make sure that the bridge itself, both for traffic and for walkability and for simply usability, is really accessible to those communities of color. In other parts, folks who are not just living right downtown, folks who are not just really oftentimes targeted and thought of as the folks who are going to access or utilize a space. So I think that even though equity as a whole is very important to the IBR program, I guess I would also like to see somewhere in here that we talk about accessibility for communities of color, low-income communities. I know we've spent a lot of time talking about, how are we going to support folks who maybe are unhoused and need to access the bridge. So I think there needs to just be a little bit of, I would appreciate a little bit of intentionality and effort to try to include demographic folks beyond physical or intellectual disabilities as folks that we want to ensure access for. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, if we can go to Greg and then Karen.
So this is a good discussion, and we just had a very robust suggestion about how we address accessibility, and that led to some comments about we have certain groups that are existing that we don't want to try and recreate the wheel, but we want to make sure that all the voices in the community who desire accessibility, their voices are reflected in our design elements. So we're going to be bringing together all of the agencies that have current committees. We know that TriMet has one of the more sophisticated, long-standing accessibility committees. And we want to see what's the right way to move forward. And if there are other groups who need to be a part of this conversation, we would surely welcome recommendations of who we need to reach out to make sure that everybody is covered in this discussion. So whether it be representatives of communities of color, communities of concern that have not had voices heard on this issue, we want to make sure that when we do pull the right folks in the room, that room is representative of all of the concerns around accessibility. So one of the other things, and this is speaking from a lot of years in the DOT world, this is one of the things that DOTs are tremendously careful around. We're talking about, going above and beyond ADA standards. That at times has led to lawsuits, and it has led to set a standard that if you do it on one project, why aren't you doing it on all of your projects? So it's a very careful space for DOTs because their systems are so big and diverse, we want to make sure that we are not putting either the DOTs or the local communities under a false impression that they can do some of the things that a singular program can do, that they can do this everywhere. So just a word of caution, and I know from my DOT friends that they've already expressed concern about when they hear you're going to go above and beyond. The lawyers at the Department of Justice for Oregon and the AG for Washington start to get concerned around that type of language. But we will bring the right folks in the room to have this discussion.
Thank you, Greg. If we could go to Karen here virtually.
Good morning, everyone. Karen Urata. I work on IBR and I'm also a TriMet employee. I wanted to thank Greg in particular for giving TriMet a shout out, specifically the CAT committee. And the CAT committee, let's see, is an acronym for Committee on Accessible Transportation. I am happy to say that IBR has already been coordinating with TriMet's CAT committee. In fact, the most recent discussion was earlier this month on the 15th, and we being IBR will continue to coordinate with CAT much more once we enter into engineering, otherwise known as design. As far as CTRAN is concerned, the other transportation agency working on IBR, they too have an analogous committee called the CAC, and just looking at my notes, it's the Community Advisory Committee. I wanted to also ask Siobhan a question regarding one of her statements on accessibility to underprivileged. I'm wondering if that could be addressed in a separate, I'll call it line item, just to call attention to it. And I don't want every statement to be made in MA 17, because I think it might get lost in the shuffle. Thank you.
Do you mind if I respond to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Karen, I think it's really important to find a balance between short answer, yes, I think you can go in an additional line item. I also think it's important to find a balance that while intentions are, again, I cannot stress enough, I think that the IBR team and program as a whole has done a really good job of trying to create an accessible and equitable process to creating the bridge and for the bridge. And given just what we're seeing nationally and just politics in general, I think it's really clear as kind. It's really important to be very clear about what those intentions are and to document them as clearly as possible so that in the future, regarding any sort of political change, we know that those underprivileged or underserved or underinvested communities are a priority for this program, and we document that very clearly and thoroughly whenever possible.
Thank you very much. Jonna, I'll turn it over to you in the room. I just wanted to uplift as well. We have heard from our equity advisory group a similar emphasis on this particular recommendation and making sure that the program is doing this engagement. So just really appreciate and want to highlight that there's alignment there as well, and also to uplift that I know folks in this group have put forward different, specific recommendations around design and considerations for individuals with disabilities in particular, but also have recognized that, that they maybe aren't necessarily the experts on that, and emphasizing that need for why that direct engagement with folks with that lived experience is so critical. So just wanted to uplift some of the great conversations that this group has had around that. And with that, Jonah, I'll turn it to you to see if we have any other comments in the room.
Great, we'll go to Holly and then we'll go to your MA 18.
Just to really kind of follow on to what a lot of folks have been saying, I hear what Greg is saying, that we have to be cautious about going beyond ADA. And I feel confident that the car part and the transit part is because those areas are pretty well codified, is probably going to be really well done. I'm a little more worried in the multimodal area. And I think it's important to note that the less income you have, the more likely you are to use other modes of transportation besides a car. I agree that the language needs to be as specific as possible. What we're talking about, a lot of different kinds of folks, not just the people who might traditionally use that multimodal route. There are other groups that can be outreached to. For instance, the county has a commission on aging. It also has a disability commission. We have Southwest Washington Equity Coalition, just to name a few.
Great discussion. Okay, Emily, tell us about MA 18.
All right, thank you. So our next one here, I will read it out and just want to flag that this is one where I think we were hoping to get a little bit more clarity from the group and see if maybe we need to revise it a bit to get at the spirit of what this recommendation was trying to speak to. So our language currently is implement periodic reviews and revisions to the infrastructure plans post-implementation to ensure they continuously meet community needs and adapt based on practical use and feedback. And so some notes that I have is that I think we have mentioned before that there will be some sort of future advisory group that will have an oversight role and could serve in this function of, getting feedback and integrating that into designs or different phases of the project. But we're really wanting to get a little bit more clarity on this recommendation and to understand if this is meant during construction phase, is this meant after the life of the program? So with that, I will turn it over for any thoughts that folks have.
And we'll start with online first, and then we'll come to the group. Anyone recalls the commentary behind this particular recommendation?
I think this might have been, recognizing that some of the parts beyond just the bridge itself are going to be happening over a period of time, and some are still in the process of being designed. Might have been related to that. We need to sort of, yeah.
I seem to recall that it was really related to hoping that there was some way to have sort of a long-term next 100 years strategy for looking at the successes and the failures of the planning that's happening now, to have in place some system to monitor and make adjustments or suggest. And I'm not advocating one way or another about this idea, but as I understand it, that's my memory, was that it was about a system to track and recommend changes that might be needed. And I don't know that honestly has anything to do with the building of the bridge, or whether that's just something that this team now thinks it would be a good idea for the future.
Any online, Emily? Oh, sorry, Mary Ann.
No, that's okay. I think I'm gonna go back with what Holly suggested, because once everything is signed, IBR goes away. And all of this is given to contractors who have signed up to do those pieces. So how do we review all of this work that it gets done in what we think we're doing? Because you're talking not 2 years, you're talking 10, 15 years of work. So yes, I think it goes back to the oversight, but it talks about, are we getting what we thought we signed up for? Because IBR goes away, we lose Greg, sorry, Greg, and it goes to a contractor now. How do we make sure that it's getting done?
So if I could,
Go ahead, Greg.
jump the line and respond. So IBR does not go away. As we go into the delivery phase, both DOTs have committed that IBR will be the oversight entity during construction. And will continue forward until the last of the project is done. So there will be an IBR presence. But one of the other things that we have been talking about is the product that comes out of the Community Benefits Advisory Group, and what the things that have been developed by the Equity Advisory Group. We would reconfigure our advisory groups into one oversight entity, and it will probably be the Community Advisory Group to carry on and make sure that all of the things that have been agreed to, that have been promised, this would be the oversight. I hate the term watchdog, but the group that would help ensure that the intent of all of these various things that we've agreed to over the years get implemented. So the IBR doesn't go away. We're looking at how we would reconfigure into a more efficient and effective one oversight group that takes all of these products, the equity framework, all of the other agreements that have been made to the community, fold them under the guidance of a revised community advisory group. So that's currently the thinking. There's not been fine pencils taken to it, but that's currently what the thought is.
That's wonderful news. Thank you, Greg.
Go to Walker, and then Emily will turn it back over to you online.
Great, Greg, to follow on that, but technically, do each of the Department of Transportation on each side, are they the ones that hire the contractors? So is WashDOT hiring the contractors working in WashDOT, or does IBR actually hire somebody?
So the contracts will actually be in each jurisdiction. So if let's say the Marine Drive interchange, which is solely in Oregon, that will be under Oregon contracting, but IBR will oversee that contract. Same for Washington. The River Bridge itself, which is joint jurisdiction, we have agreed that Washington is probably the best entity to deliver that program. So it will be under a Washington contract, but oversight by IBR. But we are also, we have TriMet, who will be overseeing a great deal of the transit work on this program as it's being delivered. So you will have some transit contracts under TriMet's contracting methods and their paperwork, but once again, overseen by IBR. The same with C-Tran. As we get into stations in Vancouver, those those contracts will more than likely be under C-Tran but with IBR providing the oversight.
Thank you.
Any commenters or questions from our online members? Corky?
I guess I'm wondering, can we just get rid of this one, based on what Greg was saying? Flip side of that, though, is interpreting, the way I interpret it when I look at it is to say, okay, we're gonna have committees following this as we go along, and then hopefully after everything is constructed and into the years down the road. But those committees probably will not have a very good disabled community presence on those committees. So the mobility and accessibility infrastructure that you put in might not get the level of review that really it deserves. So what I read into this was, after you've constructed it, to re-engage the disability communities, to look at that again and say, okay, here are our comments that we provided before construction as you're doing design. You did that. Now, did it actually work? Because some of the stuff doesn't work. So 5 years down the road, you say, yeah, maybe we should change this up a little bit. Does that make sense?
Does make sense.
So that's what I read into it. And I think that would be valuable to kind of put in there to say, look, we know you have a committee overseeing this. We know you have the IBR structure. Nevertheless, we suggest that after you've done construction, you re-engage the disability community to kind of review this.
I took it to the next level. I didn't see it was just disability community. Like, to me, it was hey, we built all this stuff.
Right.
5 years later, everyone looks around and says, boy, I sure wish it connected to this place. Or I sure wish this other thing was, like, those are things we gotta be figuring out how to go seek grant funding or whatever those other things might be to make it better. So it was after we're done, let's try it out for a while. And if it's the disability community for sure, but there may be just desires for other features. That's how I was reading it. So I wasn't even reading into the IBR running the contracts piece. I was thinking of it as a follow-up to the construction phase.
A review of our mistakes.
Yeah.
What did we get wrong?
Sure.
Okay, let's fix that now.
Yeah. And how are we gonna go to
Right. Yeah. As well as a review of potential opportunities. Right.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Very good.
I think,
Okay, are we ready
John
to-
L, if I can ask really quickly, so kind of based on this discussion, are there any particular language edits? We don't have to, maybe ticky-tacky wordsmith, but are there any higher level, language edits that folks would like to see to make sure we're capturing these pieces that we brought up here in the discussion?
Well, I think Ann McInerney Ogle, I think what Greg said needs to be in this somewhere.
Okay. Any other ideas or suggestions for how we might adjust the language to capture our discussion?
I think Ryan's point is important there too, which is the perspective look as well.
All right, thank you.
And we've got one.
Well, one way to change the wording would be to remove post-implementation and just say after the project is built. Because post-implementation is hard to understand what that means. Is it the implementation of the design, the plan, like where? But what Ryan's really saying is, let's review this after we built it periodically to see if it really meets the needs.
And I might suggest like after 5 years, like give us some period of time. Does that make sense? So 5 years after construction completion?
Put more of a time horizon on it. Yeah.
Well, it says periodic, which to me sort of says a rolling review over time, and whether that's up to us to define the period at this point may be a little premature.
There's so many different deadlines.
I would say, Janie Haygood, instead of post-implementation, maybe post-construction.
Great, and we've got Farley here online.
Yeah, I'll just offer language. So in the built environment, as in buildings, we call it post-occupancy. So we do post-occupancy evaluations, and typically those could happen 1 year, 3 year, or 5 year after a building's built. So we could use similar language here as well. post-construction, you don't always have people using it right away. So post-occupancy means people are actually using the space and understanding how it's being used. And you've kind of got a duration of use before you're evaluating it.
Great, thank you.
And Emily, I think we had a few folks join us online that weren't here at the beginning. Do you want to let us know who joined us?
Sure, yes, we have Scott here. If you'd like to just do a quick hello to folks.
Hi, everybody. Scott McCollum. Sorry I was late. I was actually attending a legislative hearing, but happy to be here.
Thank you. And then I think we also have Marcus, if you'd like to do just a quick hello.
Hello, everybody. Marcus Mundy, Coalition of Communities of Color, he, him, his, and glad to see everybody and enjoying the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, great discussion. And just a reminder, we are capturing these notes that will be integrated into when we meet next, kind of figure out next steps. We'll now go to MA 25.
All right, if we could get the chart back up, please. Okay, so our next is MA 25, and it reads, incorporate safety metrics such as parent comfort level for bike paths and level of traffic stress in urban design to ensure user friendliness and safety. And I have some notes here from my discussions with our technical teams. So from the transit perspective, safety and security are considerations, and it's part of the performance standards and the safety plans. And similarly, FTA requires safety and security management planning to be part of the designs, the construction and operations. Again, for the bridge, as we mentioned, there will be the ADA requirements, and that the program will follow the standards. And then also we had an example from folks who had seen kind of similar signage on multimodal trails. One that was raised was the trolley trail. And so I think what our technical teams would like to understand is just a little bit more about what in particular would folks like to see? Have they seen successful examples that maybe we could point to understand what you're really looking for these type of metrics on the paths? And then I also had a proposal that we do have a recommendation from Tranche 1 that talks about shared use paths and signage. And so after we refine a bit here, we could potentially add that into the existing recommendation, just as we're kind of looking to really consolidate and combine the recommendations where it makes sense, and kind of not have as much of a long list, but combine where it makes sense without losing the spirit of the recommendations. So I said a lot, and I will turn it over to you all for discussion.
And if we could pull the chart down, let's start with online first for comments. And Greg, I'm wondering if you might comment how much of this is already sort of incorporated into design standards, as well as what would be expected, and maybe for this group to tell us, a little bit more clearly what's being desired here, because some of this might already be accomplished elsewhere.
Yeah, some of this is a part of design standards, but we recognize that in the mobility world, things are in a constant state of improvement. So what we need, if there are examples in other places where they have gotten it right, and it's a nuance enhancement to a specification. Those are things that we are interested in hearing about and seeing if we can bring to the program to once again make this as good as it possibly can be. So once again, we're going to be continuing the conversation with the walking, biking, rolling community to seek out those best practices that could be enhancements to what we are looking at. So we have, I've talked to a number of designers who are interested in being on the contractor's design build team for some of these things. And I told them one of the biggest challenges we're going to have is how do we connect the walking, biking, rolling community in a comfortable way with these facilities. We're going to have some height challenges. And so the design community, the consultant community is already thinking based on numerous conversations that we have had. But if you guys know of a place where, boy, these guys have done it right, and let's put this on the table for IBR to consider.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll go to Farley.
Yeah, just to respond, I guess, to the specific line item, I think that level of traffic stress, that's the part that's important to me. And maybe we weren't clear about, like, LTS level 1 is what we want, which is really all ages and abilities. So Emily, I think to your question, if we need to be more specific, I think to me anyway, that's kind of the key is we want active transportation that or pathways that parents feel comfortable taking their children on.
Great, thank you.
And to that, if I can add on, if we have good working examples of where that more comfortable level has been implemented and folks are saying this is the right thing, if we can have those type of examples put on the table, those are the type of things that are tremendously helpful.
Yeah, Greg, can I ask the transportation designers on the project? I would think that they're most suited to have those examples because so much of it's based in context. So there's like professional recommendations that are out there, but the design professionals are the ones who are going to know what's best, I think, and then have the community respond to those things to say, yeah, we think that'll work, or no, that won't work.
And those are the things that we're going to look to have, whether it's our in-house designers from our existing IBR team or other design firms that are brought on by contractors in a design build. We're going to be charging them with doing that. But once again, if I have designers that are not bikers, walkers who don't understand the context of comfortability levels, those are the things that we ask for folks to bring good solid examples that they may know of. And if folks don't know about it, we'll do the research. But if folks know, that can cut some steps out of the process.
Yeah, I'll follow up then. So I served on the West Side Bike Mobility Project Community Advisory Committee with the City of Vancouver, and the transportation planners that the city worked with were fantastic. And that's where the LTS was presented to me for the first time. And so I think City of Vancouver, I know, has resources and connections who are well versed in these things.
Excellent.
Anyone else online? Seeing none, we'll go to Walker and then we'll go to Holly.
Yeah. Greg, you mentioned that you're communicating with the design community and the bike community. What can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, is that in-house bike community and design community, or other existing groups? Or tell me what you meant by that, please.
So we have been collaborating and having conversations with the Portland's, and I'm going to get the committee name wrong, but in essence, their bike community for the city of Portland. We have been meeting with them over the last 4 years to talk about, okay, what is it we need to see out of this project? So we have a number of consultants that some are already on our program, but some are interested in working with whatever selected contractor we have. So they have been coming into our office hours and asking what's important to the program, what things can they be focusing on. And one of the key things I tell them is, how do we make sure that we get the bike, walk, roll connectivity, the enhancements that will draw people to that mode. So these are design consultants from around the country who are interested in working on this program for the contractor, not necessarily for, well, essentially it's for IBR, but they will be under a contractor's guidance, and they want to bring enhancements that will make their proposals to contractors stand out and meet the needs of these communities and the preferences of IBR. So these are consultants, once again, from around the country who have expressed an interest in working on the program.
Holly?
So Greg, if people have ideas, things that they've seen that are particularly of interest or germane, who should they direct those to?
You can bring it as a first step to this group, and we will make sure it gets in the hands of our appropriate design staff. But we have a person, and you've seen her. I don't know if Shilpa is in the room, but Shilpa Malam, who works for IBR, who is leading the design efforts for the program. So eventually those type of things will get shunted over to her for incorporation or evaluation by her design teams to see, okay, can we make this work? Can we incorporate these ideas?
So people should email Shilpa if they have ideas.
And if you don't have her contact info, you can just send it to any of the staff of CBAG, Eric, Emily, or myself, and then we'll shepherd it to the right folks.
Okay.
And I would start with this team so Shilpa doesn't start getting emails and she has no context around them. But you can send it to her, but copy this team and tell her this arose out of conversations at the Community Benefits Advisory Group. And that way she'll know what to do and where these things are coming from.
Okay. I have a couple other questions, but maybe it might be quicker if I just email you, Greg, rather than take everybody's time. And then I think one thing is really important in this area when we're talking to people. It's good to talk to the people who are already cycling, but what's really important is to design for those who would do it, but just right now, the comfort level and the existing infrastructure just isn't there. Just a thought of why I think why we've been having this conversation about seeking lots of different input.
Any other thoughts on MA 18 or MA, is it 18 or 25? 25. Okay.
And if I could,
yes.
John, if I could, I'd like to ask if folks would feel comfortable with us potentially adding this, again, not making sure that we capture the language here, but potentially combining this with one of our previous recommendations that already speaks to the multi-use path, the multimodal path, and our wayfinding and signage, because it seems to fit pretty well there. But want to make sure that folks would feel comfortable with us potentially doing that.
See, head nods. Head nods here.
Great, thank you.
I guess when I first saw this this item here, I was a little confused by what it said. But in the context of the idea that level of traffic stress is a specific concept within the traffic planning community, that doesn't necessarily mean anything to me. But if that means something specific to traffic planning, we need to preserve that particular phrase if it's going to be moved into another, combined with another item.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. PD 14, Emily.
All right, we could get our chart back up. Thank you, Fabian, for the back and forth. Appreciate you. All right, so our next one here reads, ensure early integration of aesthetics into the bridge design by securing buy-in from elected officials and allocating budget early. So some notes that I have from our IBR teams is that there are plans for this engagement in the works, that the aesthetics piece is not necessarily a separate budget item. It's part, from what I understand, and Greg, please feel free to hop in, but that is included as part of the design, and that there is going to be a process around the standardization of design requirements so that there is consistent design, and that will be really the primary buy-in point with elected officials and others to make sure that folks are on the same page. And then just wanted to point to, again, we do have an existing recommendation in our tranche 1 that speaks to design considerations specifically, and that accountability for the consistent design throughout the program area. So with that, I will open this up for discussion.
So Emily, I'd just like to reiterate that you're absolutely correct that the aesthetics of the bridge itself, those things are included in our existing budget. We have been having conversations with the city as well as the city of Portland, city of Vancouver, as well as the city of Portland on how we can incorporate aesthetics, whether it's the columns, whether it's bridge type, all of those things are being looked at as part and parcel of how we get this bridge built. So yeah, those things are in our budget to make sure we have something that the community, it meets the community's expectations and desires.
Greg, I am more of a mathematician than an artist. I may want something very different than the elected officials over on the Oregon side. Is it really essential to put elected officials in this language, or can we just say the communities, some other language? I may want magenta and mathematical symbols and engineering, which does not meet the aesthetics of the Oregon side. Can we just put something different here other than elected officials?
We can. I think eventually all of these decisions, recommendations that maybe come from the Community Benefits Advisory Group, the Community Advisory Group, Equity Advisory Group will come up to the Executive Steering Group.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think we could take elected officials off because that gets us back into the box we were on CRC, where we had the governors making final calls on bridge type and those things. And we don't want to get to that point. We want this to be a locally driven process, an efficient process that does not necessarily has to rise to elected politics.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, Walter, and then we'll go to Paul. Corky.
Hi, Walter Valenta. Well, where this is coming from for me is when you go to Salem or you go to Olympia and they say, how come we're spending all this money on the bridge? We don't need all this stuff, and they chop things out of the budget. And so that's why the buy-in from elected people like Metro at the city, because when the money gets tight, usually the design is is considered extra and fluff and needs to be thrown out. And the community doesn't get to vote on that, Mayor. It's only the people that approve the budget that get to vote on that. So that's where this was coming from before, is getting that that buy in early, that's a value we have to pay for. That then can't be later on budgeted out because there's gonna be cost overruns, like, that happens in every project. So if you don't buy that in early, then all the things that are the nice things get sliced away. And again, it's only the elected people that really get to vote on that. And we could add in community and elected people vows. That's where this was coming from. Ensure early buy-in that aesthetics matter to elected people. And it's also at the legislative level because they get to vote in this thing still, again.
But do they, Walter?
They did last time because when it kept coming back around, at least in Oregon, there were people in those hearings saying, why are we spending money on this? Why are we spending money on that? Now, maybe Washington just already approved all your money and then you don't ever talk to them again. I don't, I hear about things going on about revisiting all kinds of things through the political processes. So you have to ensure that buy-in over and over. I don't know how to handle this, but where I'm coming from is, I think it would be really great if I'm glad to know there is an initial budget for some aesthetics, but how do we make sure that it gets maintained? And who do we need to keep informed along the way so that it isn't something that later on can be decided, well, maybe we don't really need that at all.
So if I can jump in real quick, there will continue to be a bi-state legislative group that we will continue to keep informed. It is not a voting body. They are a body that once again advises the program, and we keep them informed of where things are moving to. Yeah, they're gonna have a look at any aesthetics that are going forward. Do they have a veto, and can they change the budget? That's not their role, and they recognize their roles. The executive steering group, which is made up of the CEOs of the 10 partners, which Mayor Ann is one of those 10. The 2 DOT heads. That is the group that will ultimately say, yes, this is worthy of spending dollars on, or this is not. So we will keep others informed and make sure that we are bringing them along. But I haven't heard from anybody who wants to see us go out and build just a plain Jane concrete and steel bridge without those aesthetic elements. Now, the aesthetic elements do not constitute, they probably constitute less than 2 to 3% of the overall cost of a program like this. Now, that's not saying that's not a large amount when you're talking billions, but that is not going to make or break the program and where the program spends its dollars. So we'll keep the electeds, the legislatures through the bi-state ledge, and I'm sure the governors will want to have a look at this. But if we have a strong enough community input process, I don't think that they're going to weigh in to override decisions that are made here locally about the aesthetics and the appearance of this structure.
Tom and then Corky.
Tom Hickey, I was just going to say that there are aesthetics that are built into the form of the bridge itself, the sweep and the movement of the curves and the lines of the bridge that once designed are integral to the project from the get-go. And those aren't going to be changed by fiddling around with the budget at the end. There are other aesthetics that are veneered over the top that might be like textures of concrete or colors of things. But more specifically, I wanted to say, Emily had suggested that there are line items in our list here that cover these elements. And before we go to editing whether this particular line item should say elected officials or not, we should look back at those other line items that you say include these elements in them. Can you tell us which ones you're referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have one here. It's from Tranche 1, and it's Physical Design 11. And there's quite a bit of language around considering art and culture and the design, creating a distinct and iconic bridge. And then there's a piece about including accountability to ensure that that contractors are adhering to the aesthetic and design specifications, and that there's consistent design throughout the program area. So that's one where, I wanted to propose to the group, maybe we could consider adding to that recommendation a piece around buy-in, since there's, it's touching on these other aspects of the design and consistency.
Thoughts on that? Folks are pondering, let's go to Corky.
I would just completely agree and support what Mary Ann and Greg also mentioned, because those two things in their initial comments are exactly what was on my mind. It's going to be key how we handle our ongoing government relationships from both states with IBR. We know that. That's going to be the big element here. What worries me though a little bit when I say by securing buy-in from elected officials is elevating that a little bit, and that's the problem we had before. So let's not make the same mistake, please. It cost us an easy extra $1 billion in the delay. So, so I just support what both Mary and Greg said.
Great. Any thoughts additional? Yes, Vicki.
I'm curious about how that process works in terms of you have a legislative approval of a budget for a bridge by both sides. And if you should come up with a challenge, like we're overrun by this much and somebody needs to fix it, don't they go back to ODOT and WashDOT and say, you figure out with a revised budget where you're gonna cut? I can't imagine citizen legislators saying, oh, well, let's take off this on-ramp or.
Greg, could you maybe answer that?
Yeah, Vicki, you're right. As we look at the budget that we have and the designs and the requests, the program itself, we're going to have to figure how we stay within that budget. We have made a commitment not to come back to either state legislature for additional dollars. We're going to be talking to both Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration about inflationary pressures and whatnot. So hopefully we can be viable for additional federal dollars in the future if there is a need. But yeah, those technical decisions on what is the priority, what gets staged, eventually do fall into the arena of the DOTs. It is not, we would not expect elected officials at the legislative level to be coming in and saying, build this, not that. So those are things that the program is having continuous conversations about. How do you phase in work? How do you make sure that we can get everything done that the community has put value on and still stay within our budget? So those are constant conversations, but you're right, the DOTs would have the final say, okay, if we are running short on dollars, what is prioritized?
Any additional thoughts or questions?
We've got Marcus here online.
Okay.
Yeah, my question may be a little redundant. Good morning, Greg. Good morning, everybody. But
Marcus.
Good. I appreciate Mary Ann's comments on design. I actually like the mathematical symbols and that kind of stuff. Put that in. I look forward to that. But I do want to know, however, and this is maybe a different permutation on a question that was already asked, but will the community have a role in the design process? Will there be input? Because I know the community, the collective, we have been involved in some of these decisions in the last couple of years, and will we be involved in the future? And I'm cognizant, Greg, of what you just said about, yeah, the people can be involved as long as it's not cost overruns. I'm sensitive to that, but the earlier the community is involved in the process, you can weave these things in and you lessen the chance of having cost overruns because you're building in simultaneously design and construction and planning and all that together. So that's my only comment. I just don't want the community to get lost in all of that.
So Marcus, what we talked about earlier was who will be, and once again, I hate to use the term watchdog over the program. We know that once this group, the Community Benefits Advisory Group, does its work, it will sunset. What we're hoping is to have a reconstituted community advisory group that will take all of the work products from this group, from the equity advisory group, and roll it under one who will ensure that they are continuing to participate. And I'll give us a good example when our team, our urban design team, brought some of the transit station concepts out to the different groups. We had just robust interaction. Those are the type of things, as we get a design build team on, that we are hoping to continue as they are developing concepts to bring those two groups like that reconstituted community advisory group, for those folks to get a look at and say, boy, we love this, or oh my God, have you thought about this? So there still will be, I think, lots of opportunities for input from the community via a reconstituted community advisory group going into the future.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, form and function and cost suppression and design, they can all exist together. So I appreciate that, Greg. Thanks.
Agreed.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the next one, which is PD 16?
I think I would ask really quickly, John, I'll just bring back the question if folks would be comfortable with us potentially adding, the language from this one around buy-in to the physical design 11 that I had shared with folks. Would folks feel comfortable with us doing that? Seeing thumbs up here online from Peter and Scott.
Thumbs up, but Tom has a comment.
I would be comfortable just striking it. I don't think it adds value, actually. I think everything that's said there that actually has value is in that PD 11. And based on what Greg said, buy-in from the elected officials isn't really going to be an issue, because it's the departments of transportation and their opaque decision-making processes that will, in the end, make the difference.
Thoughts on the recommendation to just strike it all together as opposed to add it with 11? Let's see, Walter.
Did I say opaque?
No, but I can say opaque.
Let the record reflect.
Walter, what did you say?
Well, I want to believe what Greg said, and so I'm happy to strike this. This was for me, coming from the experience of being in other processes where this was a critically important step that ended up dumbing down the design as money became an issue. And it wasn't just the CRC, it happens over and over again. But I want to believe what Greg said. So we can strike it.
Heads, nods for that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next one, Emily.
All right, thanks, Fabian. If we could have you pull up the chart. Awesome. All right, going to physical design 16. So this reads, incorporate educational information near the waterfront about local vegetation and add identifying markers for native plants. So some note I have here is that this likely would fall to our program partners who or whoever would be maintaining the vegetation. So if this is in the waterfront area, it would likely be the city who would be maintaining that rather than it being the falling under the IBR program. So would want to open this up for thoughts to folks, or to folks for thoughts. And then the other piece I just wanted to throw out there to consider is we had that recommendation in tranche 3 around the community garden. Could this potentially make sense as part of that recommendation? So with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Let's open it up online first. If we can pull that down so we can see everything.
And it looks like we have Farley here online.
Okay. I haven't fully collected my thoughts, but we went online, so I'll just start talking. To me, this one is more about like ecosystem health than specific plantings. Plantings are a component of it. And to me, it's not something that's separate and isolated, like we've got a community garden here. It's more about educational materials about how this project's contributing positively to the ecosystem. So it's less of a showcase of we're doing this one cool thing and more about how the project's integrated into the environment and then making it an educational element.
Got it. Thank you.
Other thoughts online? Seeing none, we'll go to Mary Ann.
Could you remind us about the community garden, because we haven't decided the programming for this space?
Yes, yeah, the community garden was from our tranche 3, and let me see here. Language there. So yes, that one was create a community garden near the waterfront as part of bridge design to serve as a resource for local residents. And that was one where I think Greg had shared there had been some examples where that had been incorporated as part of, as part of the program, but that also this would likely need partner cooperation or partner resources for that as well.
We'll go to Vicky and then Corky.
Well, I'm wondering about adding at the end, after native plants, local landmarks of cultural significance. You know.
And I do think, Vicky, we have some previous ones that did talk about signage for demarking some of those areas of significance. So that's actually a really good point.
This is Corky. I had the same question, actually. I was thinking that's great. I'm looking at it from just the educational perspective and saying this is a great opportunity to put that information there into the design, but also do it from a historical, cultural, and geographical perspective too, all throughout the project. I assume that's in some other recommendations. If not, it's just combining those all together.
Peter?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the original point. As a gardener, I always appreciate when I see an unusual plant if it has a plant identification marker. It's pretty simple, and so I like the idea. I don't think I'm not quite sure that talking about plants in general is the same. So I think it's an easy thing. Just if you're putting in a native plant that might be unusual, people aren't used to seeing it. Let's have a little marker that says this is a so-and-so plant. And then if people are interested, they can get more information by looking up, what does it do? How is it used, et cetera.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I wonder too how those how the vegetation and culture tie in together. A couple years ago, the book Braiding Sweetgrass was very popular, and it seems like lots of people read it, and it talked about the cultural significance of the planting as well as the benefits of the planting. And so maybe there's a way that those two things get integrated.
Thoughts?
Well, this all suggests to me that the educational aspect really should be the focus more than specifically about local vegetation. There's a number of line items that talk about green spaces and vegetation and local plantings. So really what's new here is the educational process and the topics that other people have suggested for other educational topics, I think deserve equal weight. So if there's a place where we've already talked about education, I'd like to review that. I don't see it.
And do you recall if prior recommendations?
I believe we did have something about signage, and then I know we also had oh yes, we had something about integrating art and local history and culture into program area designs and as part of the overall aesthetic and design piece.
And I would suggest we just insert educational into that to make sure that the art and local history includes education somehow. I mean, I would assume that it would. Certainly local history and culture, the point of that is for educational purposes, right?
So a suggestion of consolidating some of this language within that already existing one.
I think so, because I think we've already talked about vegetation elsewhere in the.
And Vicki, does that get to your concern around the heritage elements?
Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity to incorporate landmark education about, because there's such history here on both sides of the river. So I appreciate that. We need Maya Lynn.
There you go.
Yeah, I see Scott.
Thanks. I appreciate this conversation about education and certainly support any elements of education that's built into this project as an educator. I want to remind us, though, about accessibility. And so where it seems really simple just to label a plant, perhaps in print, for those of you that can see it, we need to make sure, and I don't want to complicate things, but we need to make sure that everything's accessible. So it does get a little bit more complicated when we start talking about labeling things and all of these displays. I want to make sure that the people that I represent are included.
Scott, for that reminder.
And Jono, I wonder, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I go to Farley and we'll go to Farley first, and then I have a question for either Greg or for Ryan or any of our DOT folks. So we'll go to Farley.
Yeah, Emily, I was just curious, the line item that already talks about art and culture, is that PD 11 again? Is it the same one? Okay, I kind of wonder if we're leaning too heavily on that one. Like that has a lot of really important things in it, and I'm a little concerned that if we put everything in one, we're going to lose the intention of it, because that's also what we're relying on for our bridge to be this iconic sculpture. And that's a very different scale of design intervention than like cultural signage. And so I guess I'm advocating that we keep the signage separate. And then I really appreciate Scott's comments that we make sure that it's also inclusive in how that information, the educational information is being communicated.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think something that may be helpful a little bit, because we had the note kind of from our analysis that if it is around the vegetation piece, that it would be it would likely be for the implementation, or who would kind of be the responsible party for installing this would potentially be whoever is responsible for maintaining the vegetation. So just wondering if maybe Greg or potentially Ryan, sorry to put you both on the spot, but to see if you could speak a little bit more to that, just so folks can kind of understand what would the implementation of creating this signage potentially look like.
So I will defer to Ryan, and Carly is not here, but my experience, we're going to have a bridge crew that will be responsible for the bridge. We're going to have a lot more infrastructure such as ramps and everything that will be much larger than currently exists. So there are some elements that can be maintained by the DOT, but I'll harken back to Mayor Ann and her conversations with Carly about sometimes the satisfaction of the DOT maintenance cycles. And sometimes those things don't fit with expectations for the high-end experience that folks are going to be looking for on the waterfront. So I think it's going to have to be a partnership. And I know the DOTs are strapped for maintenance dollars existing and are going to be even more strapped going into the future. So I think partnerships to where the DOT can pay for the capital to put these certain elements in, but I think it's going to rely on partnerships with communities on both sides of the river to provide the expected level of maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, but you hit it, and part of, all these landscaping plans, yes, that's fine, those are things we can work on, those things we can install. We generally look to, especially when it's a higher level than what a DOT would normally do, which would be drought resistant, like all the things that we would need to do if you want to have more of the native, if you want to have more of the signage, you're going to be looking at a maintenance agreement of some type with a local community.
Okay, thank you for those thoughts. We will integrate those. Are we ready to move to the next one?
Yes, and I think we might have enough time, so we can at least start our conversation on the next one. So Fabian, if we could please pull up our chart. All right. So our next piece here is for physical design number 19, and that is to consider ecological impacts when developing lighting designs. And so some of the notes that I have from our technical teams are that lighting will be designed per the standard criteria for both transit and DOTs and highways. For transit, the standard criteria does include considerations for impacts on animals. There could potentially be covers added if that were determined to be needed. And that other considerations, that are built into the work of the DOTs is considerations around safety and location, of course, balancing the need for lighting for highways, but that these considerations are typically part of the process of designing lighting. So with that, I will open up discussion.
On this one. That's a first.
This is very straightforward.
Oh, see, you almost was there.
The only comment I had was a question to myself here, which was like, are we talking about like dark sky considerations? Are we talking about migratory bird considerations? Are these things part of the normal design thing? I mean, I don't know what. I know that you could put a lot of lighting on this bridge and it could shoot up into the sky and go all the way up to, down to Astoria and up to Hood River. Or you could design your lighting in a way that cast the light where it needed to go without affecting other things. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, from what I understand, that is, I did hear, from the transit team that the impact on animals is specifically part of the existing criteria and what they consider. And then I did also hear that the dark skies is again part of the DOT and like the highway lighting considerations.
Are they also considering nesting?
I think that's a great question. It's a great question.
The last thing we want are pigeons. We'll take the eagles, ospreys, and hawks.
Well, that's less about lighting and more about like the whole design, right? But and to your lighting point, it's also light wavelength. right? There's types of light that,
Right.
that do, so those are all things that are part of the criteria.
We're seeing some great nests on light poles in Vancouver.
Everywhere.
We could build osprey nests into the design really nicely. That's great.
Take care of the pigeons.
Okay, PD20.
Sorry, Jenna, I didn't catch that.
PD20, we're on to the next one.
All right, well, we've got about 4 minutes here. I think we might need more time to discuss that one. So I would maybe suggest that we can move to our closing and next steps, and we can hold these last two for our next meeting. As I mentioned, we have time built into our schedule to work through tranche 4.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
All right.
Pull our slides up here. I'll pull this out here. Rich discussion as always. Thank you everyone for leaning in and providing such great feedback to the program. It really makes a great difference. And one thing to be aware of is it's not just the folks who are watching this room. I'm getting text messages from design folks on the program as well as others. A lot of members of the program are watching these discussions, and it's helping inform their thinking as well as just the process, just by hearing you all sort of wrestle with these topics. So thank you for really leaning forward. What's next? Let's talk about that. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of the CBAG work plan. Our next meeting is on February 27th. We'll be at the Portland Building. We'll continue discussion on mobility and accessibility, physical design, and community benefits. Again, part of the review, refined tranche 4. So that will be the part 2 of today's discussion. March 27th, 2025, we'll be back here at the IBR office. And we'll continue tranche 4 if needed. And then in April, we'll have an opportunity for you all to confirm our recommendations. You'll recall that exercise that we've done in December, where we'll wrestle and we'll have red line edits, and then we'll take votes and have recommendations. And then in May, we will thank you for your wonderful service, and we'll wrap up. Okay, next slide. We're almost there. Again, next meeting is February 27th, 9:30 to 11:30. Greg, we'll turn it over to you for any final thoughts.
Once again, I'm always enthusiastic about the conversations that are had here. A lot of great ideas put on the table, and I like the discussion around who's going to be responsible for the oversight in the future to make sure that all the good work that this team and others have done doesn't get lost in the shuffle of building this thing. So we will be coming back to you, and definitely before that May ending date, to tell you what the plan is for that future group that will have the responsibilities for oversight and input into design elements as they are being final designed, and how they will interact with the overall IBR program moving forward. So those things are on the horizon. So once again, thanks everybody for your time. We appreciate you.
Erin, any final comments from you?
No, take care.
Okay, thank you everyone. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yeah, the reason I know about it.